Education, at its core, has always held the power to rebuild lives, especially in human catastrophes like war, natural disasters, and refugee crises. It provides not just knowledge, but, more importantly, a semblance of normalcy amidst chaos. For a child in a conflict zone or a refugee camp, that daily routine of school becomes a cornerstone of hope and stability. In crisis regions where schools have been bombed, homes flattened, or families displaced, though education faces monumental hurdles, infrastructure damage is often the first visible barrier. Take parts of Indonesia after the 2004 tsunami, or regions in northern Africa caught in armed conflict. Entire schools were destroyed. In many areas, children had no safe spaces to continue their education. And then there's displacement. A child who has fled their home likely grapples with unfamiliarity, new languages, new communities, and often entirely new educational systems. Combine that with a lack of resources, teaching material, trained educators, or even functional classrooms, and it's no wonder global literacy rates stagnate or decline in such areas. Safety, for both students and educators, remains another dire challenge. Teachers, particularly in war-torn zones, routinely face life-threatening dangers merely for doing their jobs. Yet, amid these obstacles, innovative solutions are paving ways forward. Mobile learning spaces, for example, have turned trucks, even tents, into classrooms. Integrated efforts by organizations like the UN have also promoted combining education with mental health services because children can't learn effectively without addressing the lingering trauma of crisis. And technology, though not a panacea, is rapidly bridging gaps. Radio broadcasts and digital platforms have reached displaced children living in remote camps, offering possibilities where traditional approaches cannot reach. The World Bank, in collaboration with global humanitarian strategies, often calls for partnerships to enhance these efforts, turning limited local support into a more sustainable global framework for educational access. It's evident that while barriers to education in crisis zones are deeply entrenched, progress, though incremental, shines a light of hope for those fighting each day to learn. One of the most pressing issues in global education today is the prevalence of inequalities and systemic failures. Gender disparities provide a particularly poignant example, and while some might point to significant progress since policies like Title IX reshaped educational opportunities in the United States, the picture is far more complex globally. In the US, we've seen a reversal of historical gender gaps, with girls now outperforming boys at nearly every level of education. Women today earn a higher percentage of college degrees, and this trend isn't confined to America. Across many advanced economies, boys are falling behind their female peers, particularly in crucial skills like reading and language. However, this progress for women and girls should not obscure persistent barriers elsewhere. In parts of Africa and Asia, girls still face significant obstacles, from early marriage to cultural norms that prioritize boys' education. Gender equality in education, it seems, remains a variable patchwork, not a universal accomplishment. Equally concerning is the role of socio-economic challenges, exemplified starkly in Hartford, Connecticut. Chronic absenteeism there, coupled with economic hardship, perpetuates a vicious cycle of educational inequity. Young people face overlapping hurdles, from food insecurity to mental health crises that prevent them from engaging in school. Tragically, this is not unique to one city in America. In Indonesia, for instance, experts estimate that over 60% of ninth grade students from rural areas experience functional illiteracy. These youths, particularly from low-income families, are more likely to leave school altogether, entering the workforce far earlier than their urban and middle-class peers. But systemic failures aren't limited to the students themselves. Educators globally also bear the weight of inadequate systems. In Texas, we're seeing record levels of teacher attrition. driven by stagnant pay scales, excessive workloads, and a lack of institutional support. It's no wonder many teachers suffer burnout, with some reporting stress-related health problems, including anxiety and panic attacks. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, the crisis takes on a different form: sheer numbers. The country is grappling with a severe shortage of qualified teachers, with alarmingly low competency rates among many who are currently in the system. At the intersection of these challenges lies a sobering reality: the mental health toll on both students and teachers, whether it's the teachers in Hartford balancing work with chronic stress or their counterparts in developing nations like Indonesia, who often feel ill-equipped to manage both large class sizes and challenging curricula. The education sector remains fragile. Each systemic shortfall compounds existing inequalities, leaving the most vulnerable populations behind. What becomes evident is that these issues are deeply interconnected, and addressing them requires more than just piecemeal policies. If we focus only on one dimension, whether it's gender disparities, funding gaps, or teacher health, we risk overlooking the structural roots of failure. However, in the next chapter, we'll shift gears to examine a different but equally pervasive source of pressure: the culture of high-stakes exams, using Singapore's PSLE system as a lens into the societal and parental anxieties that surround education benchmarks. For many families worldwide, education isn't merely a journey, but a relentless race. Nowhere is this more evident than within Singapore's education system, where the primary school leaving examination, or PSLE, exemplifies the toll of high-stakes testing. The PSLE isn't just an academic milestone, it's a societal obsession. Parents invest heavily in tuition, even attending preparatory workshops themselves to ensure their children perform at the highest level. The unintended result? A culture where students shoulder enormous pressure, their self-worth often tied to a single set of results. And yet, this is not unique to Singapore. Across the globe, outdated education systems remain firmly entrenched in antiquated industrial-age principles. Designed centuries ago to supply factory workers with basic skills and obedience, these systems offer little room for nuance, creativity, or autonomy. Students, regardless of their individual talents or interests, are pushed into the same rigid structures, evaluated by standardized tests that fail to capture diverse forms of intelligence. This systemic rigidity churns out graduates who are, in many cases, unprepared for the demands of modern economies, where adaptability, innovation, and collaboration are paramount. However, solutions are on the horizon. Indonesia, for instance, has introduced an education policy framework called Merdeka Belajar, or freedom to learn. Unlike traditional models, this reform emphasizes personalized learning pathways, giving schools and teachers more autonomy to adapt curricula to the needs of local communities. Students are encouraged to explore their interests while building essential skills. It's a simple truth. When learners have agency, their motivation and engagement naturally follow. Technology, particularly artificial intelligence, has also emerged as a promising tool. In China, AI platforms are being leveraged to address disparities in educational attainment by tailoring instruction to individual student needs. Teachers, who once wrestled with managing large class sizes, now have access to tools that minimize their workload while maximizing student engagement. Similar hybrid learning models are being explored globally, blending traditional teaching with digital resources to create flexible, adaptive environments. Of course, technology is no silver bullet. Sustainable change requires policy-level commitment and cultural shifts. For Singapore, perhaps the solution lies not in abolishing systems like the PSLE, but in reimagining how they measure success, placing greater emphasis on skills development over rote learning. Globally, we must ask whether education systems are preparing students not just to pass exams, but to thrive as empowered, innovative individuals capable of navigating an increasingly complex world. And with that, we arrive at the end of today's episode. Education, as we've explored, is both a microcosm of societal pressures and a tool for unimaginable growth and change. It's clear that we are at a crossroads, not just in singular classrooms or countries, but globally. Together, as parents, educators, policymakers, and lifelong learners, we have the capacity to rethink and reshape this institution. On that note, we'll leave you to reflect on these challenges and the opportunities they present. Thank you for tuning in to this final chapter of our series. Until next time, I'm Chen Hao. Stay curious, stay informed.